get the Photogenic Family Award.
Oh.
And my dad was beautiful.
Thank goodness they all look like their mother, that's all.
I don't think they all do look like Mindy, but it's just a gorgeous. And the horses in the mountains, oh my gosh.
Yeah,
That was beautiful.
Thank you.
I hope you got a.
Yeah, you know, Karen Crane does those. She's beautiful. You've been over to her place.
Yeah, she took our family photos a couple winters ago. Unfortunately, getting my romance through together with boys.
Yeah.
I just said, no, we're doing your studio. I'm not complicating it in any way, shape, or form, because we'll be lucky. But how we complicated it is what the grandpa did. So we just need to be, I'm going to put on Charlie Hudgens. I go, Giddy. Okay.
Well, I was surprised we were able to get the horses to the boat for so long in that photo shoot.
Smile and they want to, their bank's looking off. I don't care.
Yeah.
He's the dog.
Right.
Okay? You've got to look. So we went. He was there a couple of meetings with him in various states of disarray. I have a family photo when my youngest was a baby.
All right. So we're just after 6:30. Go ahead and call this meeting to order. If everyone wants to just go ahead and introduce themselves to get started. I'm Ken Lish, OSAC Chair.
Karen Taylor, member.
JJ Ballou, member.
Tricia Dunham, Vice Chair.
Tracy Collar, member.
Sandy Pennington, Trustee Liaison.
Allison James, Staff Liaison.
All right. Public comment. I don't think you have anything else besides the equestrian, so we'll just go straight, unless you do, but we'll go straight from public comment into the equestrian event. This is Jim Sautel. I want to come up. He's going to be working with us and providing all the know-how and horses and everything for the equestrian event coming up. So he's going to kind of give us a rundown of what him, Sean, and Tracy talked about. Yep, please.
All right. Thanks, Ken. Jim Sautel, 353 North Snowmass Circle, Superior. Well, I guess, I haven't prepared anything, and I apologize for that in advance. What sort of prompted this was discussions between Sean Samuelson and me. Sean and I have coached youth sports here in Superior for quite a few years now together, and it was really in the context of him indicating that there may be some interest on the part of OSAC to do something with an equestrian event for the town. And so that led to, I suppose, some discussion around some of the things that I've been involved in over the years with my kids primarily and others in the equestrian community, doing kind of like mini horsemanship clinics, I suppose you would call them, basic intro to horsemanship clinics, primarily to scouting groups and things like that. I think what that was spawned from was just kind of a recognition that there are oftentimes a lot of young people in particular, but grown-ups like us, like me, who would like to know more about horses and owning horses and how do you ride a horse, how do you do all of that, and so so in the past, some of the things that we've done is my daughter is really the equestrian in the family. She's been very much involved in competing with equestrian events for many years, and we've done various things where we'll bring in horses and just kind of introduce the kids to basic care how do you act around a horse, on up to how do you saddle up a horse, how do you ride a horse. We can do all of that stuff. And so that's really what I think spawned the conversation between Sean and me. And we talked about possibly hosting an event like that in October, and maybe doing it at the corner down here by the roundabout. I'm not sure what we call that corner that's undeveloped down by the roundabout.
Richmond Park, is that what we're referring to?
Is that, yeah. We talked about that as a potentially good site because of its proximity to the trails across the street, in case anybody wants to ride. And, you know, I have to confess, it's sort of in its infancy in terms of planning. The last time we got together to talk about it, you know, we kind of talked through different scenarios, and as I've sort of reflected on it, I think maybe what we do with it might depend on what age groups we want to target and how long of an event do we want to do. So, for example, the types of things I'm mentioning, these have been kind of like hour-long events with the kids. Of course, you don't have a huge attention span to deal with there, but usually the horses will keep them captivated a little bit longer than other things. And that generally covers some of the basic safety issues and things of that nature, do's and don'ts. And I suppose we could think about, you know, do we want to give them coloring books and things of that nature? On up to, if we wanted to get a little more in depth, you know, we could extend it out longer. We could maybe do some breaks, maybe have some riding if people want to get up on the horse. I was just up in the mountains this weekend with some friends, and there were 6 kids around, and I'll tell you what, I mean, you couldn't get them off the horses. They just, I mean, they would ride, and then they would, you know, it was hard to get them to want to take turns. So you know, I think that might go over pretty well too. Other things to consider, I suppose, are how many people do we want to limit the event to a certain number of participants? Because, of course, if everybody wants to ride, you know, a 15-minute ride, you know, that's going to fill 3 hours if we have 12 kids. So that's something to consider too. And maybe lastly, and this might be repetitive, but it occurred to me more recently thinking about it that one option might be to do more of a kids event and then do an adults event separately. You know, the adults can absorb a lot more information. And one of the things I've always run into with adult friends who ask me to introduce them to horseback riding, which I've done quite a bit of that. You know, they want to learn how to tack a horse. How do you just take a horse out of a trailer, put the saddle on, get all that stuff going, saddle up and ride. And we can do all of that. I think the kids might find that a little, you know, they're probably not going to get as big of a kick out of something like that, especially when it comes to throwing a big heavy saddle on a big horse, you know. So that's kind of where we've started with this. And, you know, I'm totally open to whatever everybody wants to do. If you want to think about doing a routine, you know, series of events, you know, like maybe every other month or something, I don't know. I'd be happy to do something like that. My daughter Anna, I've talked to her. She's actually off this summer doing an internship, but she'll be back this weekend, and she's all in, and she wants to do it. She's going to be 21 next week, and that sort of age seems to appeal to young people. You know, especially I've seen working around equestrian barns with young girls. They love, you know, working with the older girls who know a little bit more about horses. And, you know, we could do something like that. We're totally open to anything. So happy to kind of just have a dialogue with you all, and, you know, whatever thoughts you might have, happy to give you my reaction.
Well, my first thought is, I mean, you kind of said it, the writing thing is a huge draw for the kids. So I think if we're going to do a kids-oriented one, writing should definitely be involved. That does bring up the trickiness of time management, that sort of thing. I did like the idea of adults and a kids separately, so you could kind of gauge them differently. Maybe even a younger kids and then teens / adults if they wanted to learn as well. I don't know how long you guys can be out there, but we could even try to do those back to back just to save multiple trips. And then based off response and kind of demand, we could go from there if doing a series or that sort of thing. I mean,
I definitely think we'd have to limit we'd have to do a registration like we do
Yeah.
for some of the other events and say there's a cap off.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. When I think of the kids, I would think like start the program, really part of this got generated from thinking of trail etiquette, like for kids to understand that like the horse trumps all, and sort of if they're out on the trails where horses are allowed, sort of having an idea of how to interact with a horse, because I think, I know my son's first interaction, the thought would be, let's run towards the horse and try to pet it. So for the kids, I would think some sort of talk in the beginning about, like, if you see horses out on the trail or that, and then maybe give them rides. 15 minutes, they'd be thrilled, but I don't know if you'd want to go that long.
That's a long ride.
That's a long ride. I'm sure the kids would love it, and you're right, like when their 15 minutes were up, they would argue with you for 10 that it was only a minute, so. But I do like that, and then think the same thing, that the older and adult who might be more interested, not just, a 7-year-old's not going to be able to throw a saddle on
Right.
your horse.
And, how many horses? 1, 2?
We have 2.
2 horses.
Yeah, and to your point, Ken, about bringing them down here, it's really not a problem. I mean,
Okay.
we just keep them up here on McCaslin, so it's not, I wouldn't even envision trailering them down there unless that was part of the program. If people wanted to see how do you load a horse and unload a horse and all of that, we could do something like that, so.
Do you have access to additional horses if there were more kids?
Could we get additional
Yes.
horses? I could probably get one. I mean, there are
One.
those other horses, but
Mhm.
they're not very gentle.
Okay.
Our 2 are pretty well trained,
Mhm.
so I'd feel pretty confident
Yeah.
having them around kids. But there is one other up there. I could probably talk a friend into letting us borrow him, so.
But then they have to be under that same insurance stuff and all of that, which we know that you've
Yeah.
sort of gone back and forth and cleared with the appropriate town staff, I think, of all the rules, so I don't know. I'm just
I
saying,
think
if
we
someone
c-
else's horse gets involved, I think they have to go through the
Yeah.
whole same process.
I think we can work through the liability issues. I mean, that was something I mentioned to Sean. I know there's the Colorado Governmental Immunity Act, which applies, and there's the Colorado Equestrian Activities Act, which applies. I think maybe if we could ask participants to sign a waiver, that might be appropriate. They're dangerous. I mean, I've been to a lot of horse events where people have gotten hurt and kids have gotten thrown, and there's always that possibility. I mean, that's the one thing about it. You're dealing with an animal that's 1,200 pounds and pretty unpredictable. So.
Typically, with a lot of our vendors, we have a waiver, but we also have a insurance coverage, like on top of the waiver, so that might be something.
That would be great from my perspective. I'd rather not have to represent myself.
Yeah. Well, and we've addressed it with Kendra, and I believe she came back and said the town providing the liability insurance isn't an issue. So who would he work with to get that figured out?
Well, I think the group would have to make a motion to request to pay for that insurance, and then get, approval for that, if that's the way the committee wanted to make the decision.
So are we sure the town's existing insurance doesn't already provide coverage? Are we sure of anything?
Well, we haven't had a program like this
Yeah.
before. So,
That's where I'd start. I would ask the town manager to handle this and tell us what we need to do. He'll assign it to whoever's appropriate. And, he needs to be, he needs to be fully apprised and in agreement with having this program.
And I know Patrick reached out to Kendra
Mhm.
to see if it was okay. I would have thought she would have mentioned that it's already covered if it was, but I didn't see that question specifically asked, so we can definitely follow up.
Yeah.
there may need to be a few more steps, just because it is a new program, and the group hadn't really made a decision if they wanted to do it yet, so it wasn't completely pursued
Right.
to fruition.
Yeah, I would say that if the group decides to do it, insurance right now isn't your concern. Your concern is, does it further your goals? And how would you put the program together? And then the financial insurance things would be addressed, and if they're possible, they're possible. If not, they're not. So that's sort of how I'd go about it.
Would we provide safety equipment, or would we ask people to come with their, like, bike helmets and jeans or whatever they would need?
That's a really good question.
Is a bike helmet sufficient? I was thinking the same thing.
My daughter took riding lessons. They had her in a bike helmet, but I know they make special ones too.
Yeah. I mean, I would think a bike helmet would be sufficient.
Or a scooter, or
Yeah.
I would suggest a minimum age. If maybe a minimum age is 7 years old or even 8 years old. Something where you don't bring a 3 or 4-year-old just for the entertainment value.
Mhm.
I do think you're going to have to limit this, so I'm trying to, in attendance.
Right.
You can't have 60 people and 2 horses,
Right.
that kind of thing. So I think since this is inaugural, it makes sense to say the first X number and to set the age. And I like Ken's idea that maybe you have one for 8, 9, 10, and 11-year-olds, and another one for, you could do 12 through adult, or you could say 12 through 18, and make this just a kid sort of event, and have the next one be adult, that kind of thing.
I think that's a great idea too, because on our tree climbing program, we do 7 and up, just like you, because of the attention span and the safety issues.
Well, and we could even do it in waves. I don't know how feasible it would be, but if we, let's say, have like 6 kids, the first 6 show up at like 3 o'clock, they do like a half hour of safety, and then at 3:30 they can move into the riding area, and either you or your daughter could then be doing the riding with whatever help you would need.
Right.
That would mean that there's only 3 sets of riding there, because 2 at once, and then at that same time, the next group of 6 could come in at like 3:30. That way, there's both the learning aspect of the safety and the riding going on at once, and it might just eliminate more of the downtime.
Yeah. No, that's good.
unless you think, do the animals need a break? Like, is there anything that they would need, like a break for?
Yeah, that's. I was going to raise that point. I noticed they do get cranky after about 3 hours or so of riding. With kids riding them, they start to get a little testy, and that's when you start to get nervous that they're going to do something like bolt.
Do you have an idea of the upper limit that we think we would have for each group? We're saying 6 per 30 minutes, but that was just a number that was
Pulling
thrown
out of the
out,
air.
because I think that's an interesting number if it was 10 people that could even go versus 50 that could go.
Yeah. My thought on it, and honestly, I haven't thought about it that hard, but when Sean and I were talking, it seemed to me that probably 10 to 12 kids. Of course, if it's adults, I don't think it matters. As long as they can hear you. But with kids, they're all going to want to ride, and they're all going to want to run up to the horse, like you were saying, and all of that. And it does. We've done scouting groups where we've had Girl Scouts, big troops of like 50, and you can kind of manage them, but I don't know that they get that much out of it. It's kind of like a classroom type of a thing. And Sandy, I think you're so right about the age thing. Anecdotally, the first time we did this, we had really young kids. I think we had like 5 and 6-year-old kids. And we had a trainer, our trainer came out and did it. She said, first thing, don't ever throw anything at a horse. Kid reaches down, grabs a rock, throws it at the
Oh,
horse.
my God.
Went downhill from there. But, with young kids, I mean, that we're going to get that, so.
Do you think it's actually better to go almost the opposite way? If you're talking about tacking the horse and doing that, it might be better to start with the group that would want to see that, so then you would get the horses all prepared. And so go the older. I'm thinking, I actually like the idea. I mean, I think it's great to go through adult, but I think I like it that it would, sort of be a kid-centric event, so you could do like 7 to 12, 13 to 18 for the, the age groups. And since it would be a, inaugural event, we'd see how it goes from there. If it gets a lot of things, we could then go back and look at expanding the classes. I think that's how you ended up with an adult tree climbing class, right? Because people got really excited and wanted to do it themselves, but maybe we'd flip it and say so they could see the horses come off the trailer, get all that, then the horses are ready, move through whatever group that is. In my head, I'm thinking probably no more than 20 people all total. That's probably
With the parents.
Well, the parents wouldn't ride. I'm saying, the parents are sitting in the back, not throwing rocks at horses, not doing the other things they're not supposed to be doing.
So are you talking 10 and 10?
Yeah, I'm thinking 10 and 10 or
12 and 12?
12 and 12.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think more than that would be,
So we could do like 2.
just since it's the first event, it's always hard
Yeah.
to judge the
Yeah.
first. I think if we want to go for success, smaller is probably
Better.
because
Yeah.
then we can control more of the variables
Mhm.
as much as we can with an animal that has its own mind and its own things,
Have
but
a cap of 10 people.
Yeah.
10 people.
either
For the two
cap
horses.
it.
If you only have 2 horses, I think 10.
Yeah, so or if it's 6, or, whatever it is, 5 in the first group, 5 in the second, or whatever. I also think keeping it lower, we would probably get those numbers as well of people signing up that are interested
Well,
enough.
And if it looks to you guys like there's a lot of interest, I mean, we could do it again,
Right.
and
Yeah, we can set up waiting lists, right, Allison? I mean, that's generally how that goes, yeah.
And I wouldn't be too fixated on this riding business. I think getting on the horse, prancing around in a little circle, and getting off the horse. So I'm not thinking 15 minutes
Right,
out on the trail or
Yeah.
anything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I have a question. If you consider having 2 groups and switching off, having one person with one horse doing the safety and tacking, and then the other person doing the circle, and then
yeah,
switching.
we could definitely do that, or break it up. Do all the safety at once, and then break up into riding the 2 horses. I mean, one is kind of more suited for an adult; it's much bigger. The other's pretty good with kids.
Have you thought about also having the trainer out here with you and your daughter? Because I would say that if the trainer needs to be paid,
Yeah.
there would be funds for paying the trainer, I assume. I mean, there's funds for paying other people. So,
Yeah,
And-
I could check into it. I mean,
If
we're
you-
kind of in between trainers right now.
I mean, if you would find that useful, to have that third
I
person.
appreciate that. Yeah. I don't really think it would be all that necessary as long as Anna's there with me. I think we could probably do just fine. We've certainly seen the presentation enough and been a part of it enough that.
Well, and I want her to bring all her trophies and pictures, and so that this will bring life to it, that
Yeah.
she's been a competitive
Yeah.
equestrian.
Yeah, well, I could probably try to talk her into that. I don't know.
And all the
Well-
appropriate pamphlets, so the parents who would then have to say, oh, where do we go next with our kids,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That want
Yeah.
to.
How much, the cost.
The cost.
Yeah.
What is
right,
the
that's,
cost of a horse riding hobby?
All I can say is the acquisition cost is nothing compared to the maintenance cost.
Ooh.
That's something everybody should know. So.
Believe that.
But I just kind of as an aside, as you were talking about the different age groups, one thing I've noticed that's just kind of cool and just something to think about is, I mean, I've seen Anna from age 7 on up to 21, riding with her friends. And, they want different things from horses at different ages. And when they're young, it's just really cool to be around such a huge animal, and they're beautiful and everything else. But what's really cool to me is when they get into the middle school and young teenage years, tough years for everybody. But there's something just really therapeutic about, being able to jump on a horse and just go and get away from it all. And, so if you do decide you want to kind of break it out into different age groups, I mean, I would probably say, well, with the teenage group, let's give them a chance to ride a little bit and maybe go out on the trail a little bit and just kind of get a flavor for what that's like. And of course, adults want, and adults want different things too. They want to kind of know everything there is to know about it. So we could do any number of things.
How many volunteers would you need for assistance, do you think?
I think it probably depends on the size of the group. I mean, if it's 10, probably not anybody.
Okay.
I mean, I don't want to make work for anybody, but and we can always enlist help from the people that are there, the moms and the dads or whatever, but I don't really think we're going to need that much. I mean, if we were talking about a huge group, then probably we would need a few people around.
And I think it was October 16th that we were looking at. That was a Sunday. Does that date still work for you?
That works for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was the date we were thinking of? 16th.
October 16th.
Side note, I do love the coloring book idea and some type of horse. I know that's funding, but horse ancillary stuff for kids, just to when they get antsy. If 7-year-olds shouldn't, but
Yeah.
that's cool.
Well, and maybe some other collateral back to what Trish said about the etiquette
Mm-hmm.
with horses. I think that's an important thing to tie into all this on the trails.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely want to make sure that it ties back to OSAC's mission and goals. So trail etiquette, getting out and actually using the open space. So understanding the trail etiquette of the horses out there, actually getting people excited about using trails or horses out on the open space, and building that desire. Clearly the safety goes with it, but yeah, I think trail etiquette's definitely something we'd want to touch on.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that until you guys mentioned it, and that is really a pretty big deal, because you're right. I mean, you're riding a horse, and people immediately head to the horse, and depending upon the animal, I mean, they might freak out, and oddly enough, around bikes, they get really twitchy, right? With it must be the wheels. I don't know what it is, but it freaks them out. So.
And dogs. I mean, dogs
And
are out of
dogs.
town, so hopefully on leash, but
Yeah.
not always.
Not always, right. Yeah, that's a good point.
But I think for the education, it's good to have the trails and that, but I think also the publicity of after, like the things we can send out after on the, town website or something, will also be helpful for the education piece of saying, we ran this event, this is why, here's the sort of top 5 things you shouldn't do when you're out on the trail and see a horse, learn what to do, and we can expand it on that part on the education as well, to meet more than the people that just get to attend the event.
Yeah, that sounds good.
I was thinking in my head for timing, just as you were saying, maybe not so much of an overlap, more of like a 10:30 to 11:30 for the younger, or like, well, earlier I said, do the older and then maybe the youngers before, give you guys a break for a half hour to eat lunch, let the
Sure.
horses calm down, get one group out, and then bring the other group in at like noontime or something. Might be good to sort of build that kind of that way if there's any extending or, we've got some timing in there,
Yeah.
however it works, like I said.
How hot is it going to be that day?
October
Right.
should be, it actually should be,
Noon
could it be?
On a hot day is just a little.
Could it be snowing?
Could it be-
Which
yeah.
would be a whole nother cool thing to do with, the horses
Yeah.
can go out on the trails
Yeah.
regardless of the weather,
Right.
more so than some of the other events. But October could be 90, it could be rainy, it could be
I think
snowing.
Allison's looking up average temp.
I was just looking that I'm going to be out of town that day, so just
Oh.
so everybody knows. I have that on my calendar.
Is that half hour something that you perceive to be needed? If we have an hour for the young group, you think you need a half an hour break? And then,
Yeah.
are the horses going to appreciate that?
That's probably more than enough.
Yeah, so maybe 15 minutes.
Yeah. If we
Yeah.
were to go like an hour and a half in the early session, then, maybe a 30-minute break would be a good thing. And, kind of depends on how long you all want to do it. But if we did an hour and a half early, half-hour break, hour and a half after, that would probably work pretty well. I was wondering if the Broncos are in town that weekend. I don't even know if they're.
That's a good
I
question.
couldn't tell you.
Because that could have an impact on the numbers.
Right.
Which actually means we might want to do it earlier.
Yeah.
Rather than an afternoon.
Yeah, and it's fine. I mean, we could do earlier in the morning, whatever you all think would make sense.
Okay.
So I think that maybe we'd have to make a recommendation to the board and get their sign-off.
Yeah, so do we need the board's formal sign-off? We need to send a recommendation up there?
I think putting it in, I don't really think so. I think having Matt Magley sign off is critical, and it'll be in your minutes. And he should have it in his reports, et cetera. But I really don't think it explicitly needs the town board sign off. But Allison, cover me on that and check that out for sure.
I will. Does the group agree they want to try to hold this event?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think.
I mean, it's a great exploratory event that we've never done before. I mean, we might end up finding this is something that is really desired. Do a lot more.
There is no Bronco game that weekend. They play Thursday of
Oh.
that week, so
That's good
not even,
fortune.
no game,
Perfect.
so, yeah.
All right.
And when's Chili Fest?
September 10th.
Yeah. No October event on a Saturday from the town perspective?
It's a Sunday. This is
Okay.
a Sunday we're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. That's a Saturday.
So, I suppose on our end, Allison, and if you need me to send anything to Matt as well, we can take care of that. Jim, it might be best is, I mean, you're still the expert who's going to be running it. If you want to start to just kind of put together your thoughts on what the event would look like based off everything we've talked about.
Sure.
How far in advance do we typically start marketing events like this?
Well, in my opinion, for something like this, it'll probably go really fast. And if we're limiting, the participants to a manageable number, it's going to go really fast. Probably a month to a month and a half would be what I would suggest.
So we would want to know for sure, we could tell at at Chili Fest, we could be telling people then if it's, if it's already booked, we can say, oh, we have this event, look for it next year, but.
And I can add it to our marketing materials because we'll still have song dogs in the Nature at Night hike, the last one in October. I think it's on a Friday night. So, we could have a little handout that has the equestrian event and our Nature at Night, at the booth for Chili Fest.
Okay. So, I suppose if you want to start putting something together, you can send it over to Patricia and I. We'll just work offline with you to kind of get it firmed up, and then we can just all talk about it at our next meeting, make sure we're all on board with the plan, and we'll go from there.
Okay. I'll get to work on it. So.
And if you need anything
Do,
else from us.
Usually, I know you're very busy. Do you want to, usually you would take a crack at what it looks like. Do you want to take that crack and get it to Jim to jumpstart this?
That would be fine with me. I might have a few questions, and maybe
Sure.
we could just email
Yeah,
and kind of firm it up a little.
yeah.
No problem. And I can do the registration with our town system and get that all set up, make sure things are on calendars and in newsletters and,
Okay.
kind of our normal.
You got all my contact info, right?
I do.
Work is best, because that's where I'm going to be most of the time. so.
Okay, and maybe if you could send me your daughter's email as well, and then she could give some input on logistical and ages and how she feels, the number, and
Yeah, yeah. That'd be good for me to bring her down and introduce her to you once she gets back. That'd be good.
That's right.
All right.
Perfect. Thanks, Jim. Really appreciate
Okay,
it.
yeah, you bet.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone. See ya.
Thank you.
All right. So next on the agenda is Boulder County open space and trail priorities. Yeah, Allison's going to pull up what we had last year. Yep. So while Allison's pulling that up, ProStack did talk about how. So, just for everyone who's new here and haven't been through this, let me back up a bit. Every year we provide our trail and open space purchase priorities to Boulder County to try to get on their radar. Superior does it, Louisville, all the municipalities. The way we do it here in Superior is OSAC provides a recommendation, and in the past, ProStack has provided a recommendation as well. And usually they match up pretty closely, and if not, then they more or less will get meshed one way or another, and it gets sent to Boulder County. We met with some of the Boulder County representatives earlier this year who gave us more insight on our recommendations and how they've been received in the past. Generally, we've had the exact same recommendations year after year after year. There's a few that we will probably want to drop this year. ProStack is considering dropping the Zaharias property from their recommendation. Their thought process is that it's already been proposed as a conceptual design to the board for development, and that this is likely no longer an opportunity.
Where is it?
That
It's near the reservoir off of 88th, so when you're going up 88th, between 36 and 88th there.
yeah.
So they,
So pretty much a triangle.
they came to the board, a developer with a concept plan for that the board has given direction back about open space around that reservoir. So I would agree that dropping, it's not something we want, I don't think, Boulder County to now
Well,
purchase.
And I suppose my question is I mean, it hasn't been purchased yet by the developer, I don't believe. Sandy, do you know if that's true?
The Zaharias?
Yeah, I think Saharis hasn't been purchased yet by the developer.
The developer wants you to see if that plan is viable before.
I can't tell you for sure, but my instinct is you're correct.
My only concern is if we drop it and for whatever reason the developer decides to back away and doesn't move forward with the concept plans that have been presented
Why don't you just mark it on hold?
on our actual,
Recommendations to Boulder County. Just notify them on hold because currently being considered for development.
so we would still leave it on there. We would just say, just note that it is marked for development and might be purchased in the near future.
When we spoke to the guys that came, and I'm blanking on their names right now, but for the past several years, funding has been on flood mitigation from the 2013 flood. Do we feel that this might be the year that they've actually gone back to having actual money to do something? Or do we still feel that they're in there trying to do the flood mitigation? I can't remember.
I got the impression that they're still heavily working on that, and even, I went camping, I don't know, a month and a half ago, and they're still doing flood reconstruction on the canyons up in Boulder. So it's, I think, still a project, but that's just assumptions on my part.
So just for the group's information, we have not received a request this year yet from Boulder County, and our neighboring jurisdictions have not either.
There's no reason why we won't get it, though, right? It's just we
They
haven't.
may not send it out if, they may or may not send it out, but.
We have not gotten the request.
Correct.
We usually still get it, though. They always still request, but then they've just been putting it aside and not really.
So they want to buy this piece?
No, this is this is what they want.
being Boulder County, or they being who's the they in your question?
Yeah, I guess I don't understand what the recommendation is, but I did have a question. Isn't this the same piece that rancher wants to put his cows out on?
No.
No.
Oh, I'm in the wrong part of town.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
We're
Okay.
over by Vista.
What is the zoning on it right now, though?
Allison, could you,
On Zaharias?
show
I
where-
thought it was a little triangle piece
There's
here with that
Zaharias
little
up there,
extra
if that
duty
helps.
there.
Do you know the zoning, Sandy?
Oh, gotcha.
It has to be at least mixed
Oh,
use,
the other
because
is
that's what's
here.
being proposed. I don't know the,
Okay.
there are various categories within
Monarch
mixed
High
use.
School. Oh, yeah, I live right there.
Yeah.
I'm catching up.
So
So,
this is basically us saying that in an optimal world, we would love for that property to be purchased and preserved as open space.
with the pond and all that, and just.
Well, that pond is outside of this property.
The pond remains regardless. The
yeah,
pond-
that
the re-
doesn't-
The
Pond stays.
reservoir is
Yeah.
that. What we've tried with the development plan and with the board is anything that does go in there, we would like to have the developer put some nice, leave around the pond, sort of open or viewing. That's sort of been our
Doesn't
recommendation.
Monarch High School run back there when they have their, sometimes?
I don't-
Does it back up?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. There's no trails back there.
There's
Yeah.
There's no trails on this side. They might run on the other side of 36. I don't.
Yeah.
Okay.
If they are, it's not official
Oh, I
as
see.
far.
It's on the other side. Got
Yeah,
it.
Monarch's on the other side.
Got it.
Yeah, we're.
Okay.
this is
So
just on-
since we have several newer people, so this Boulder County Trails list is Allison, you can describe it better than I, it's the land acquisitions that would involve some sort of relationship with Boulder County, right?
Yeah.
And so this is just us informing them of what our priorities are. All things perfect, and there's money, and there's motivation, and whatever to acquire something. So our first property on here is if all those things converge, our first priority would be X, and our second priority would be Y, and our third priority would be Z.
Right. So our first priority has always been level 3 property. Do you guys all know level 3? Okay. So that's always been our number one. Boulder County's response to that is they're willing to consider participating in the purchase of this property depending on price and terms and if funding is available. The next property we recommended was Zaharias, which we were just talking about. Their response to that is they have no acquisition plans in this area. However, if Superior is able to negotiate a purchase agreement for a portion of this property, Boulder County would consider partnering with the town if funding is available. And then finally, the third property that we've always proposed was the Bulljack property. The Bulljack property, and there's a map right below there, but it's really small.
Whoops.
Yeah.
It's that one, right?
Yeah, it's.
By Bearhead?
There we go, right up here. So lower left.
Oh, right, okay.
So that's the Bulljack property. And then their response to that one is also that they're willing to consider participating in the purchase of this property, depending on price and terms, if funding is available. So my preference is, I mean, that aligns with what our open space purchase goals have always been, is that we more or less keep those as is. And I would say let's keep Zaharias on there and just note that it's currently under development. It could be purchased soon.
Yeah. I mean, if anything, we could say, oh, drop Zaharias to 3 and Bulljack to 2. I mean, I think level 3 has always been number 1 and would remain number one for the citizens of the town. I mean, that's always the feedback that we get is.
I would keep the order in what the order would be if the current potential private deal fell through. Would you want
Yeah.
it 2, or would you want it 3?
Yeah, I think it would still be our
Okay.
number
You
2.
can- Yeah, I think that's.
Yeah, it's
So
pretty
are
there.
we limited to 3, or we just try to keep it reasonable? Is that
Well,
more what
because
it is?
I think we limit ourselves to 3 because Lafayette's doing the same, Louisville, they're not going to purchase 3 from, for Superior. They're going to look and say, if they have any monies for acquisition, they go across the whole county and say, where do we want to?
Should we consider that other property that came available that Sean was talking about right by that other office building on McCaslin? I don't know if that's the
Yeah, so-
Weinstein property or.
Yeah, that one's not really available.
It's not available. We've
Okay.
already approved an FDP for it, a final development plan.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
okay,
it's not
okay,
really.
so
Or,
gotcha.
Yeah.
Something, maybe not an FDP.
The for sale is
It's
a
in-
little
it's-
misleading.
Okay,
It's-
fair enough.
Yeah,
Thank you.
seriously under development plans.
And for my understanding, we were approved with ProStack, the prioritized trails, but was that for our own purpose and not for Boulder, or is
Correct.
this?
Yeah,
Okay.
correct. These are monies that Boulder County might have
Okay, thank
available
you.
with their mission is to.
And a lot of
maintain
the
all
trails in that plan were interior to us and not going into other municipalities and jurisdictions.
All right, thank you.
So didn't ProStack have another comment?
Yeah, so that was their comments in relation to the properties, the open space properties. In relation to the trails, and we can scroll down. Yeah, it says 12 in the corner. I don't have the PDF of what it is. Yeah. There we go. So, again, this is the order with which we've had these trails in the past. So that first one, trail connection from the proposed US 36 underpass, Davidson Mesa, and then crossing Marshall and linking to the Mayhofer Singletree. Does everyone can picture what we're talking about there? So the new underpass on Marshall, this is to connect a trail out there to the existing trail that goes through that open space. I don't see any reason why we'd want to switch that. That's still a high priority.
We lowered that on our internal list, though, didn't we? Because we thought Louisville was going to push it more than we would?
Because
Am I
they're
remembering
working,
that right?
because they're working with Boulder County.
Okay,
So because this is going to Boulder County, I think we'd still want to let them know it's a priority
okay.
for us from that aspect. Number 2, the trail connection added to Meadowlark Trail at its westernmost point to a link with the Colton Trail to the south. That is a trail that they said isn't feasible. They looked at that alignment and for several different reasons decided not to go forward with it. So when we had our conversation with the Boulder County folks when they came over here a few months ago, they pretty much said, we're not going to consider that. So that's something that ProStack is wanting to drop, and I think we would agree there's no reason to keep that on. We know the answer is no to that.
The only
Right.
thing I would say is I say I'm fine with dropping it, but we should note somewhere, so when it comes up in 3 years and everyone asks why we won't do that, we can either, that group, the committee then can try to re-bring it up or know at the historical level of why it was dropped. Because I think some of these trails people think in their mind are going to happen.
Yeah.
And it's just nice to know that, no, it was looked at, they looked at it, we looked at it, that's why it's off the list.
I agree, and this is always going to be one that citizens are going to think should be occurring.
And just so our new members know, on this right area, it describes what Boulder County thinks of each request.
Okay, so our second priority, that Meadow Lark Trail, that's just never going to happen. Yeah. So we want to take that off.
Yep.
I don't know about never, but it was
It sounded
highly
pretty
unlikely.
never.
Yeah.
It sounded pretty never. But that's
I mean,
something-
they'd really have to have more push, I think, behind it they would consider it, but given the grade, it didn't sound like there was some
Well,
very
no,
interest.
I think this was one they also had habitat.
Concerns, yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember what specific, whether it was animal or plants, but there was something as well when they talked to us about
Oh,
it.
yeah, you're right. It says right there. Impact to wildlife.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. So yeah, that's the one that ProStack is proposing that we drop, and I don't see any reason why we would
Yeah.
disagree with them.
But I do agree with Tracy. This is one we should all sort of get on our radar, so when people ask us at the Chili Fest and other events we attend, we can
Have an answer.
clearly state why it's not and do some education to the citizens, because I agree, I think it's one of those ones that will keep coming up.
And do you guys know what we're talking? Can you picture where this is?
This was the one where, like, they couldn't make it ADA, it was
Bingo.
too steep.
It's like
Is
right
that
over
the
here.
one?
No.
This is the huge one.
Okay, because I remember there was one that was like, it makes so much sense to do it, but like, it can't even be legally done, kind of.
Yeah, that
This
one's
one
down a
had
little bit
grading
further.
problems also,
Yeah, it's still at the grading problems.
because it's at 15% and ADA is 3%.
Did they do that on the side, or did you do that?
They did that. This is their report. After we submit our request, we get a report.
They don't
Right.
up on the
Exactly.
hill. Mention the
It's got
grasslands. You know
ones on the
that
west side.
huge.
Okay.
I forget the name of them, but yeah, this was the connector right there where they.
Yeah,
said-
that it
They're-
cuts,
Thing that they
divides it in
reference?
half.
Yeah,
Just
which
can't
is
meet
their
guidelines of
Bible.
wildlife and all
It's
that.
interesting that they don't mention that
A lot
anywhere.
of people visible up on the ridge.
Yeah.
Do you
Well,
remember?
Want
What was that
so-
called?
So that's their,
Their grasslands management plan.
Yeah.
well, but they have.
Eastern grasslands management.
Sorry,
Southern.
but they have, the first thing I think that you're talking about is not the grasslands management plan. It's the one they currently have, and then the grasslands
Right.
management will be a new one.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you're right. The current one.
It's the Marshall area
The
management.
Comprehensive management.
Yeah.
Plan, thank you. That's the one that they currently have, and they reference that, and this is in it, but they
Okay.
will also be doing, on their radar in the next 1 to 2 to 5 years, will be this grasslands management plan that will include.
It's right here, Marshall Superior Colton Trail Corridor Management.
Yes, so that's the one that currently exists, and then they're going to be doing a grasslands.
I did know where all these were.
That's on their that's one of their work plan kind of things to do in the upcoming year. They're still working off that 2006 one.
South of Depot Street in original town.
Okay, so so the next one is lost it. Are we Shan Shan? Yep. So Shan Shan. I don't know. I don't think we would want to adjust that. We've purchased the Shan Shan property. It's always been the goal of OSAC to at least make that a trail connection point, if not a trailhead. So that's something that we definitely want to keep on Boulder County's radar.
And they assisted in that purchase, so they are aware we purchased it.
Yep.
Where the farm is?
Going down to the next one.
Ken, though, read the note there. The last line, this isn't in the plan, the Marshall Superior Management Plan, additions and changes would therefore need to be evaluated through an amendment process.
Yeah, so what they told us to do was when we get to the point that we actually have an idea, we should put together a more concrete concept and meet with them, and they would go from there.
Right.
They were also going to, I think because Patrick were you here that night that they were here? But they also talked about connecting with like Patrick and you sort of in just your general working relationship to go out on the property again and look at it.
And we
stuff.
did. We did go out to the property and do a walk. And I think I recall something about perhaps not approaching it through this process, but approaching it through a separate process, specifically for this one.
For this one
linkage.
area.
Yeah.
Yep. And if I'm recalling, they had fairly favorable reactions to that area as well. I think I talked to Patrick about it in passing.
Well, part of it may also be, as well, is looking at the town center and the different connections that are starting to emerge out of that, as well as, different traffic patterns that are going to occur, and maybe, look at it in the context of a larger picture.
Yeah. And the potential new development on the Rogers property. There's going to be a lot more density.
Yep.
Where's that?
Rogers is right next to Town Hall.
Oh.
Over-
Right,
The cows.
right there.
Sold, or is that?
Yeah.
They sold it?
Yes, Ranch Capital has owned it for about a couple of years. Yeah.
So moving down to the next one, our next trail recommendation has just been to improve the surface and safety of the Colton Trail. I don't know how many of you have been out there. It's incredibly rutted out, in many places. That was the response was that we would include that in our South County Grasslands Management Plan when we put that together, and they've said we'll do that 1 to 2 years for probably 4 years or so. So I think it's something we want to leave, that way it continues to stay on their radar.
I think that's going to be one that ends up on Tori's volunteer trail repair list.
Mhm.
Eventually.
It's a walk, that whole stretch though, that, it's like 3 miles long, right?
Well, I don't know that the whole thing, but I think
Parts of it.
but
Yeah.
I think we have a better chance of working with Boulder County's volunteer trail maintenance and what Tori's been putting together and maybe getting something done to Tracy's point that they have trails that are in a lot worse shape from the flooding.
Yeah, not a high
that they've been
priority for them.
working.
So the next one is a link between the Myhofer Single Tree Trail and the Coal Creek Regional Trail. This was one that we had included on our expedited trail recommendation to the board, but ended up dropping. We ended up dropping it mostly because right now there is already a somewhat social trail. It's not a well-maintained trail, but there is a trail there. It would need work. And additionally, we're thinking that the Rogers property we might be able to convince them to add a trail, so we wouldn't have to use our funds for that. But Boulder County also told us that this would be a prime connection for their regional trails, and it is a priority for their transportation department. So again, I think this is something we want to leave on the list, that way it stays on their radar. Moving down, Colton Trail south to Highway 128. This would be another connection just at the lower part of the Colton Trailhead. Their response to us is, yeah, we'll talk about that in that Grasslands project. So again, we don't want them to lose sight of it, so we should probably leave it on here. That gets to the last one, and this is what we were talking about earlier, where this is access to the Meadowlark Trail off of McCaslin near High Plains Drive and Christensen Avenue. That's where there's currently a drive accessible to the trail, but it's gated off. We were hoping when we talked to them that we could just open that up as a trail access point, but it doesn't meet ADA specifications. It's graded too steep. Their response was if we wanted to, we could build some type of trail that right next to it that does meet ADA specifications. I think this is one we need to think about a lot about whether we want to pursue it. If we go after this and we go after Shan Shan, plus we already have the Colton Trailhead where it is, we're now talking about 3 access points within a mile of each other. Are we getting duplicative? If we want Boulder Valley to, or Boulder County to chip in, would we want them to help us with Shan Shan, or would we rather have them help us with something like this? My knee-jerk reaction is I think it makes more sense to focus on Shan Shan. It's going to be next to the town center. It's further away from the Colton Trailhead, so it's further distance from an existing place. I just think based off their response that they can't just open that gate, that this might be an indication that we want to drop it from our plan.
I'd agree. The other thing, but I also feel this is another one that people ask us about constantly, and they did tell us they will not open that gate to provide access. So I'm fine with focusing on the Shan Shan, but I think this is one we want to get ourselves well versed in so that we can speak to it at events or when questions come up that say that's why it's not being done. I know that people are socially using it, carrying their bikes over, doing that, but
Why not ask Boulder County if they'd put a sign on it explaining that this trail, this entrance cannot be incorporated into the trail system, that it's been reviewed and it does not meet the qualifications to be added as an entrance to the trail system. And that would educate people that it's already been through the process and rejected. And they probably would put something like that on there.
One helpful
Yeah, that's
thing
a
might
great
also
idea.
be for the events is to bring this corridor management plan, and it shows that they had all these different alignments considered and the rationale behind selecting what they did.
I mean, but this is just a list of our priorities. Like, we don't have to drop it just because it doesn't look like now's the right time. We can set it to a lower priority. I mean, its place in the priority now already shows that we emphasize Shan Shan and some other things long before we emphasize this. And that's...
That's true. If we ever do have the funds to do multiple things, it might be good to keep it on the list. I don't disagree with that.
Superior's rich grandpa.
I would agree. I think there is value to memorializing all these. And you can always add on hold, inactive, but at least you know how fast the membership of these committees turns around. It's then at least memorialized as having been discussed at some point in time.
On that note, could we leave this connector where it is and then also move the Meadowlark huge trail below it and put something clever, Allison, like you just mentioned, on hold or currently unattainable? We'll readdress in
Tracy,
the future.
which number are you referring to?
I think it's two, isn't it?
Yeah,
The
it's
huge
the one up at the Meadowlark one.
connector that goes through all the natural habitat.
The one they said was impossible.
1A
Mhm.
That too.
or 2.
That
Yeah.
too. That one can get done. Yeah. The only thing I would say about the number 6 is it can remain on the list, but it is Boulder County property, so the town of Superior can never, we can help fund a trail on it, but we can never put a trail on it without their sort of permission anyways. my understanding, yeah.
Did the group want that moved to number 5 or number 6, 2A?
I'm going to be honest, I'm not sure that's even, I mean, it's kind of different because it says right there, difficult or impossible to meet federal, county, and city design guidelines.
I totally agree, but how else, as Sandy's speaking to, how else do you keep this
How did
information?
ProStack handle it?
ProStack would like to drop this completely.
Well, we do have the report, and if we pull up, say, 2 reports.
So,
as we
yeah,
go
but why
along,
can't you have it at the bottom, dropped,
We could.
August 10th, 2016?
I think
Yeah.
maybe
Because-
it's.
So we
yeah.
would include that in our recommendation. All right, so this is actually Boulder County's response to us, so I don't think we would see that in their response because we're dropping it, but it would allow us to see that we're dropping it.
Yeah. So in our
That makes
next
sense.
recommendation, the next one wouldn't, I don't think would have this on the list, but we would have that historical
our-
thing saying,
Yeah.
that sort of that way. Because I don't think we want to put it on the list back to them and say, we're going to
Yeah.
keep this on the list even though you keep telling us no.
So move it to number 6 and.
Put it to the bottom, and then we'll just say, we're dropping this from our recommendations because Boulder County has said it's not feasible, or something.
Not
to that-
possible.
Not possible.
Possible, yeah.
Okay.
Going back to properties, I do agree with you that the Zaharias would be nice to keep on there as it currently is, because we have no idea what's going to happen with the developer tomorrow, let alone
Exactly.
years from now.
I would say on Zaharias, you just say on hold while development proposals are being considered by the town of Superior.
Do we even want to say on hold, though? I mean, we can just make a note that it's currently being proposed for development, but, I mean,
Yeah.
honestly,
Yeah, and
Does-
that's fine, some
It's not put on
note.
hold from us.
Yeah.
It's on our decision to put it on hold.
Yeah.
Does the group want me to assemble this list and then send it back out, and then we can vote on it on our next meeting? Or
When do you have to have it done?
They haven't requested
we
it
haven't gotten a
yet.
request.
Oh, yeah. I did want to answer her question, then I want to tell you something about Zaharias. She asked what you would like her
Oh.
to do.
I think that's fine. I mean, there's no rush to get a recommendation in if they
No.
haven't requested it.
I don't think they've requested. I guess the other question I would say too, which would give people time as well, are there any others that are on Boulder County space that we would want? I mean, we've sort of been working this list of 6. Is that really because that's the only 6 left sort of in the connection area? Is anybody aware of any that have never made the list that we might want to add? And maybe, Allison, you can check with, just his name.
Patrick.
Patrick, thank you. And even Martin, if there's others that have remained sort of off the list that we might want to bring back the next time. Just because they might have a more historical view, because these 6 have been on there for years, so.
I could definitely check and then include that with my list if there's any other things that have kind of, been put to the side.
Potential new acquisitions that have popped up.
Either, not necessarily,
Not
I
that I
think
know
the
of.
acquisitions we're aware of, I just think more maybe other trails that would cross Boulder County open space that sort of might not, since we are all newer members within the last 4 years, might not be on our radar that somebody wanted a trail there at some point. That was more my point, because this has been the same list pretty much since I've been on the
Yeah.
committee since 2013. But I
This
don't
is
know.
where, remember when I said, on past iterations of this committee, the chairman of this committee also was a member of Boulder County's POSAC, Parks and Open Space. And so he was constantly in touch with what was happening on Boulder County space. So those meetings are public. You guys could always attend, and if some of you are real serious about really getting involved in this on a broader scale, you can apply for Boulder County's board like this. Sean had volunteered to read minutes and forward relevant things, but that doesn't preclude anybody with an extra evening or a lot of interest in doing that. And then what I was going to tell you on Zaharias, you'll recall I told you there was a concept plan. It was their second version of the concept plan, and they really paid attention to this group's request about widening, if you will, I'm using easement with a small e, the distance between the homes and the reservoir, so that it could be more of a public amenity with a trail around it and that kind of thing. And that group of developers was interested in meeting with you guys. And I woke up bright and early the next morning going, whoa, this is not a thing that really is politically correct to have you guys meet with the developer or ProStack meet with the developer. There was a issue a couple of years ago in which this happened, and it really blew up. But I talked to Matt, and what will happen is we'll invite them to a work session, and we'll invite you guys, and we can invite ProStack to the work session, so all the same people are in the room. It's just the structure by which we would do this would be a little different.
That's great.
So that's sort of the...
Yeah, and I think they had mentioned during that they were allotting over 4 acres to open space.
Yeah, and they really want to work with the town to figure out a cool way to do it, so...
Yeah, that's great. So I guess the last thing I had was that number 6 trail that we were just talking about, whether or not we need to change the wording in that. Seeing as how they've told us that we need to create a new trail rather than use the existing. So add access to Meadowlark Trail off McCaslin Boulevard between High Plains Drive and Christensen Avenue. The short trail connection would follow an existing social trail. Leads from the Chasm Boulevard north. So I'm almost thinking we could just drop that last sentence. I'm not sure we need to specify that it follows a current social trail. We don't know exactly where it would be. We only put that last part in there because we had an idea based off the vehicle access point. But now that we would actually have to design a trail from scratch, we just know that we'd want it in that area.
That's true, but that is the shortest distance because the trail goes like that.
Yeah,
I'm not saying
it bumps out there. Right?
Yeah, I'm not saying it would need to be either, but just in saving.
Oh yeah,
money.
Well, and
maybe.
it still says between High Plains Drive and Christensen Avenue, so it's still at that closest point.
But did this assume another trail would be built? Because if you just add a trailhead there, how do you get to that trail?
It would have to be another trail, a
Like
short
up
little
to where
connection trail.
The stoplight is there by High Plains Drive, or down to the Colton Trail. I mean, it seems like it's a trailhead with no access.
That's a good point. And
Well, it wouldn't
what
be
we
a
had-
trailhead though. It
Or
would-
a trail
with
access.
no access.
Yeah, an access.
But how do you get in there?
And the way we had thought about that comprehensively in the past, and we were going to include it on the expedited trails plan, was building a trail from High Plains Drive to that point. We didn't move forward on that based off what Boulder County told us about wanting that we would need to build this new trail here.
So that Christensen Avenue is misleading then? Because if you did it off High Plains Drive, does it really have any bearing on Christensen? Christensen was relevant here just because of where that gate was.
Yeah.
So if you lose the potential of the gate, then you really are more doing something off High Plains.
That's true.
Yeah.
So add access to the Meadowlark Trail off of McCaslin Boulevard near High Plains Drive.
Yeah, I like that.
I think that makes sense. All right, so I guess just to sum up, we're going to keep Zaharias on, but add a note that says, that notifies Boulder County that it's currently being proposed for development. We will move that trail 2A to the bottom and just make a note, and this is more or less for ourselves, that it's being dropped because Boulder County said it's impossible to move forward with it. And then this trail number 6, we are just going to say near High Plains Drive. And that's it. Everything else stays the same. Perfect. Anybody else have any comments, questions before we move on?
Nope. And we'll vote on it on the next one when Allison comes back with, if there's any other potential trails weren't aware of.
Honestly, we have quorum right now. We just listed off all the changes we're going to make. Can we just vote on it now and accept it with those changes?
You could also do that, and then if something more comes up, you amend.
Yeah. So Allison, let's talk to Martin and Patrick, see if there's anything else. All right, so you want to make a motion? I can make a motion.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we vote on our trails and acquisition recommendations to Boulder County.
As amended.
As amended. Thank you.
I second that motion.
Okay, so the motion is to approve our recommendations to Boulder County based off the amendments that we just made this evening. Any further discussion? All right, all for this recommendation?
Right.
Aye.
All against? None? Passes unanimously. Perfect. All right. Moving on. So the next topic is Chili Fest. As mentioned earlier, that is on September 10th this year. It goes from 2 o'clock in the afternoon to 6 o'clock in the evening. This is, for those of you who haven't been able to do that outreach event with us yet, it's, again, one of our high-volume events where we get a lot of people coming up to our tent asking us questions. It's similar to what we experienced at the pancake breakfast, but more people. I think something that we've been doing at all of these events that we want to keep doing is to see if there's our outreach on our expedited trails. We have the map that Allison made for us that shows the exact trails that are currently under design and proposed for construction. We've done that at all 3 of our big events this year, so I think we should continue with that. As mentioned earlier, we can start to promote the horse of the equestrian event as well, if we still need to at that point. Who knows? If we've already started registration, it might be full. So we can.
It fills up pretty quick.
Yeah, so we can play that by ear. Allison, do you have, and it might be too early to know the answer to this, but last year we shared a tent with ProStack. Do you know if we will be sharing tents again this year, or whether we would have our own tent?
Well, for example, 4th of July and Chili Fest, there's very limited booth space, and depending on, how that shakes out with our event coordinator and supervisor, it could come to that, and as soon as that information is out, I would provide it, just like I provided you the map and the list, so that you could see where our booth was going to be for 4th of July.
I think we should work under the assumption that it would be the same. I don't think there's going to be, because it's not just ProSac, the recycle committee was there.
Well, that was for the pancake breakfast this year. Last year it was just us from ProStack under one tent.
Yeah, but I don't know if they're going to attend.
It may be just one.
So where I was going with this is we have been fairly judicious with our budget this year, and we did really good controlling costs with the Trails Day. compared to prior years. So we actually have flexibility to do something more excessive if we wanted to, if we thought it'd be a good opportunity for outreach and if we had a good idea. If we are limited to 4 committees in one tent, that kind of limits what we can do and might scratch that plan. So I'm just throwing it out there. I mean, we've never talked about this before. Does anybody have any thoughts for what we could do as another outreach activity or something we might want to do? Allison, if you have any ideas, please as well.
Well, people seem to really enjoy our snake presentation at National Trails Day. And, you know, there's large fields around this event. So if you're looking for another possible way to enhance Chili Fest, I can always go to
Bring some snakes. I'm just
Well, it's actually kind of funny because the snake one might be good in the sense because Chili Fest and the Beer Fest, obviously, I think are more geared towards the adults in town. But you bring your kids to them, but there's not necessarily a lot for them to do.
But it could also be even a separate snake event standalone. I mean, I was just...
With his
But
own
if-
booth.
Yeah, but if we
That-
moved to like the back, like you said, near the back of one of the baseball fields or something, and had sort of a scheduled show, we could do that for an hour or so. I mean, they did what, an hour on the snakes?
I think it was roughly an hour.
And I think they could have done a little more. The kids wanted to hold the snakes.
Would they find us back there?
That's the question. I don't know if we've ever put anybody back there. That'd be something new. We'd have to figure out how to navigate people back to it.
Might be too.
Well, that's why I'm saying if it was an event to schedule, at, like at 1 p.m. well,
Right.
actually I think it's 2 to 6, but if it was like
Yeah.
at 3 p.m. go see the snake show, or 3 p.m. send your, not toddlers, but your, 8 to 12-year-olds back to sit and watch the show.
What time did they usually do the voting on the chili? Is it like 4? But you could arrange it
Well,
somehow
you could get in the
around.
schedule that it would be at a certain point, and
Well, and that's something I could talk to our event supervisor about and see if, if there's timing issues or, anything like that. But like I said, if it didn't happen at Chili Fest, and since the budget has been, we've been really frugal, that might be, we could do, a standalone also.
You don't even really have to do a show, possibly. If you had your own booth and you actually had the person there with that snake wrapped around,
That's cool.
right in
Yeah.
the thick of things, people would stop, and then you could also talk about your mission and everything else. And it's not all snake-centric, but it's a nice...
I think it's a great idea.
You could do spiders too, like tarantulas or something. But you already have a lead on a snake lady, so, or a snake guy. But yeah, we could just have them there, and people will come and look, and like you don't have to do a whole big
pretty
deal.
arresting. You stop because you think at first he's wearing like a little boa, a fur boa or a fake boa, and it's a live snake.
Well, I love this idea. Does anybody else have any other ideas that they want to throw out there?
I wonder how long those snakes can stay out there. Like how long if he would just hang out for a while.
Good question.
With
Even
a
if it
few
was
of
an
them?
hour, though, it would still be a draw.
Yeah.
More
Yeah.
than what we would have with our maps.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be the whole time.
Yeah.
And I could reach out to him and see if that's even feasible.
Just 2 hours,
Yeah, a couple of
2 to 4,
hours.
2 to 3:30, something like that.
We could have some kind of a game, or, like you said, if there's not that much for kids to do, or a face painter or somebody. I don't know.
We'd have to tie it back to open space somehow, but
Oh, it has to be tied to open space.
paint trails on their face.
Oh, yeah. Well, they could always use multiple people for that because the line's always so long.
Well, remember how busy the face painting booth was at Pancake? I mean, that had the line.
Yes, it was.
Even when we were tearing down, there were people in line for that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So, I wish I had brought this up at the last meeting, because if he is booked, we only have one more meeting beforehand, and it's literally right before Chili Fest. It's the week leading up to Chili Fest.
I could I can reach out to him. He's he's very responsive, so I could send everybody an update.
Is it after Chili Fest?
It is, yeah. 'cause
All right.
of the time.
I take that back. This is our last meeting prior to Chili Fest. Yeah, yep. Okay. So, yeah.
Is there, I don't know how you guys feel about this, but is there a dollar amount that you would like to suggest to Snake Conservation to be in the booth and donation? Yeah. What did you?
Pay for Trails Day. What did you donate?
$175.
And that was for roughly an hour. It's a 4-hour event here. If we had them for like the first couple hours or so, I think that's when volume's usually the highest. So I'd say 2 hours is what we'd be looking for. So $300 to $400 is, yeah.
Well, he probably won't have to bring all of the.
It would be a much
gear and
smaller
snakes.
thing for him.
Yeah, so it would be a smaller version.
She'll get it cheap. I'm confident.
Yeah. I mean, we have the flex. I mean, let's just assume high end and say $400. We have the flexibility in the budget to pay that amount, right? So we're not running up against running out of money or anything like that with this. So do we just want to put a cap at 400 and then you can talk to him and negotiate and decide?
Sure. Very close.
At El Dorado, when they did their carnival, they had a gentleman who was doing spray-on tattoos, which might be another thing, the same with the face painting, but might be different. I don't know who it was. Prairie dog tattoos. But we could just say that, you know, for a couple of things, we could say that it would be an animal. We could even say it's one of these 6, so you keep things moving. Like, because at El Dorado, he had a whole set of stencils, but we could say, well, to keep the lines moving, you could say, well, only do these 10 or something, and the kid gets to pick one of the 10 and
A snake.
a snake. Well, a snake, a prairie, you know, the snake eating the prairie dog. I don't know. You could get, but it might be another avenue too. If I know somebody mentioned face painting.
Oh.
Face painting. Well, they're quick at it and people like it.
Do you know?
I could try to ask. I don't know. It was a gentleman. I don't know who it was, but I can ask the PTO who they used.
Somebody that could educate, the young people on when they're walking on the trails and they see these different kinds of poops. You know, this is deer poop, this is bear poop, this is coyote,
The
this
scat.
is cat.
Yeah.
This is,
Mm-hmm.
Ashley
and,
does.
You know, I mean, I've been seeing that around town, and I was like, I think that's interesting. So
Oh, it is. I've been thinking the same thing.
I think that would be kind of a cool little informational thing to have at our booth.
Allison, you know if Ashley, I know Ashley touches on that at some of her events, or she has in the past, I think. Do you know if she has pamphlets, or if we can have pamphlets to hand out there? I mean,
Well, I mean, I'm sure.
We
I
get
can
our own
print,
pamphlets, I get.
Look some stuff up and print it out. But
Just
keep
the
in
takeaways.
mind, we would have our marketing, and then that handout, and then our trails maps,
Mhm.
and then the comprehensive plan from Boulder County. And,
we're getting heavy.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on how many people are gonna come, and I guess different people will wanna discuss different things, so we can have all of that.
I think it all comes back down to, so if we do this, and we were in the tent with Cameron, so we had Snakes and us under one roof, do you think that would be possible? I know that there's the space concerns.
I definitely think that would be possible. I have to check with Katie to see how our booths are looking, and then tell her we want to try to do an enhancement with something a little more than just
Typical.
our typical handing out.
Okay. I think the SCAT thing might be a great just event in itself almost. I mean, that could be worked into like tracks, SCAT, and that's, I mean, I'm with you. I'd love to sit down and get taught all of what I'm seeing out on the trails.
She does that, though, on the wildlife walks. That's what she does. She has a crate
All
that
of them?
she brings.
Okay.
Yeah, so, I mean, that, she already does that if you attend. I've attended a couple of her the Coyote
Yeah.
Walk and others, and she points it out there, and she does have them as well as pictures and things. So I think that gets covered. I don't necessarily think we would need another
Another
event.
one.
We could just ask her, or
Could we
more
have
on
the
our
printouts?
marketing of it.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, yeah, this is about drawing people into the booth, right?
Yeah.
Just on
Yeah.
that day. Is she going to be there in her own booth with her stuff?
no, that's not
Okay.
one that we put her in.
Because we could either borrow or maybe the snake is going to be enough for one thing.
I'm
The
assuming
snake
the
will
s-
be.
I think the snake would be good, and the snake, my take on this, and this might just be mine, is the snake's distracting the kids while you're talking to the parents about, you know, what's the, the importance of open space, and what's the, you know, what are the citizens' priorities of what they think the open space.
Does anyone play the Pokemon game? Should we put a thing in our booth that makes everyone come to get a thing? I don't play the game. I just know that you can set it up around there.
Who selects where those are?
I don't
have
even
no
know. I
idea.
know
You
nothing
pay
about it.
$1 and set up a lure.
Boom! I'll pay
Wherever
$1
your
and put a lure in our
GPS is on your
tent.
phone.
It's not a bad idea.
I'll pay $1 and set a lure on our tent, and then everyone will come.
I actually did some research for our department on where things are all over town, just because we had such an influx of kids in our parking lots and at our parks. And
Interesting.
so I did a bunch of research, and my kids play it. So.
I'll try to figure it out, and
I
I'll set
actually
one
love
up
that
that day
idea.
and see if people
Yeah.
will come.
Yeah. Wait,
That makes us look hip and stuff.
So you can go online and
It's $1 for 30 minutes for a lure.
Oh, whatever.
And
I'll
you just
pay
set up
$1.
your account.
Oh,
But
we can-
accounts are hard to get because the servers are crashing a lot. So it may not you may not want it to be something you advertise, because then if the servers are down, it may not pop up. But if
Oh,
you
gotcha.
have it,
They'll
they will
find it.
come.
All right.
Let's
I'll
ab-
try to figure it out.
Let's
I'll-
absolutely do that.
Sounds like you've got the liaison here to make it happen.
I will. I'll do research and email you. I'll set it up and see. My kids
Yeah.
don't play
Tell-
it. My
Yeah.
son's like in this really disagreeable
Do
mood
not
this
tell.
year, where he's like, "It's dumb." So he's 13. So.
Well, let's move forward with snakes and Pokemon.
All right, I'll do that.
That's funny.
Never thought I'd say that.
I know,
In
me
the OSAC
neither,
meetings.
I love the tattoo idea.
Whatever.
We need to save that for the future,
Okay.
because that's a
We
great
can
idea.
definitely save that, yeah, because that will probably be too much, but we'll save that for the future.
But I can get that poop information
Perfect.
somewhere on my own, online somewhere.
That's the quote of the night.
It's everywhere. Like even Estes, in Estes Park, the YMCA of the Rockies has had a whole program on the scat hike.
Scat hike. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. My kids went on that. It's a very good
It
one.
is. It's a
It
great
is.
program.
All right. So that brings us to updates and look ahead. The first one is Trails Outreach. We had talked about this briefly at our last meeting. Where we left at our last meeting is that I was going to reach out to Peter, the chair of ProStack, and see if we could do something together, what the idea was for doing outreach about the trail that is somewhat up in the air as far as being controversial. ProStack talked about this at their last meeting. From their notes, per the board's request, ProStack is planning a brief community outreach discussion regarding the 2016 trail construction project. The meeting will occur at 6:30 p.m. prior to a regularly scheduled ProStack meeting. The meeting date will be determined after the trails have been designed and engineered. So their initial instinct is it'd be best to actually get everyone into a room. This is something that they'd like to take the lead on and get moving. It's something I think we should still have a hand in, considering that we propose the trails. They're funded with open space funds. So I guess what this is just an update. That's where it all is. It's not going to happen until we get the designs back. But if anybody has other ideas, this might be a good time to just talk about it.
I'll lead off. The original intent was not in a room. The original intent was to knock on some doors in that area, in that residential area.
And I watched their meeting, and they kind of went back and forth on a few different things. It almost sounded like that they would go door to door, let the residents know that this is going to happen, and that there will
Have
be a
them
special
come.
meeting
Okay.
for them to come.
What's the area being impacted that's controversial?
It's over by El Dorado School, and it cuts through a little greenway where, yeah.
Opal Way, Torrey's Peak, that area over there.
So because it's a little green belt right now,
It's really small. Oh, there's going to be something that goes through.
exactly, people aren't used,
And so
don't know
it's
there's a
little
trail
something
there,
they're
so.
iffy on it?
Well, we just don't.
Yeah.
We just want
Oh,
to
you
check.
just don't know?
It's
Okay.
overwatered.
Yeah, one of the trustees was particularly sensitive to it, want to make sure that they didn't get incredibly surprised
That
with the
was a
trail.
bulldozer in their backyard and.
And now there's a bunch of people walking through your backyard.
Sure.
So it makes sense.
And those were like. Yeah.
So my intent is to continue to work with Peter to let him know that this is something OSAC is interested in, and that we'd like to have a hand in planning and working with him on.
Because that's a trail that has been approved,
It's under design right now.
under design, okay.
Yep.
It's being looked at as potentially, so if we put the trails behind McCaslin, which we do want to do, connect down, and then that would also connect over to the trails that are going into El Dorado's park there, okay, park. But I don't know if they'll come back and design and say that it's not a feasible place for a trail.
Which is why wanting to wait to do the outreach, because if it's not a feasible trail, let's not start a fire
Yeah.
that doesn't need to be
Will
started.
that trail connect to the trail behind your house?
This one, the one being proposed?
Yeah.
No, it's actually,
On the others.
if you drop your kids off behind El Dorado K-8 back there.
Right.
There's a stop sign right there, and it's really marshy between
Yes, I know where
the
it is.
properties. That's the link.
Got it.
And,
But it doesn't come.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay. That was all the update I had on Trails Outreach. Allison, do you want to add anything to that before we moved on? Okay. The Boulder County tax meeting. So Karen went to that for us. She got some printouts of a handout that she got while she was there. The long and short of it is that there's a Boulder County, I already have this, wants to change the open space tax from 0.25% to, for just open space, to now being still 0.25%, but only 0.125 would go to open space, and 0.125 would go to sustainability projects. The commissioners already met on this, and they approved it going to the ballot. So we'll see in November what everyone says, but that could be just a change in the open space tax that Boulder County receives. Karen, was there anything else you want to add to that?
Just that there was some discussion afterwards. One of the gentlemen that was there, he seemed to be really inexperienced, and he was
not in favor of taking any money away from open space. That was just, and there was a Lafayette resident, and she felt the same way, and so there was some concern about taking money away from open space.
And I'm sorry, just to reiterate, it was .125 open space and .125 sustainability projects?
Yep.
Okay.
And what's a sustainability project?
They didn't define it
They did the
specifically,
categories, yeah.
but they provided examples in the categories that they could fall into.
And just to be clear, this is not the open space tax that Superior also levies on.
Right.
Yeah.
This is Boulder County's. But if it does go down, it would affect the things, well, all the stuff that we just talked about, it would be less. But I don't know if then they would be offering sustainability projects to the
Well,
county as well. So I don't know how we'd fall in the
The intriguing thing
sustainability
here
projects.
is, and this is not a new concept, a couple of years ago, they repurposed some tax that's being collected in another fashion. They had to ask the taxpayers if that repurposing was okay, and the taxpayers passed it. And I do think it's going to be coming at Superior sooner rather than later, because we've got at least one that runs out. And I think that's the one they repurposed was actually expiring several years down the road, and they said extend it, but for this purpose. So all municipalities are going to be facing this because these initial open space, now that a lot of open space has been acquired, and really geographically there's not much more to acquire, the town of Superior will have to ask itself, how long do we continue to collect this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or should we continue to collect it but have voter approval on what to use it for?
Mm-hmm.
In addition to open space, perhaps. So,
But I think that's part of why we've talked in the last year about that it wasn't just for acquiring open space, it's also for maintaining it and,
Right.
you know,
well, and it's
providing education to our.
that's why you went with the trail
Yeah.
Initiative.
Yeah.
Okay. Next update is the Superior Town Center, Parks 1 and 2. At the board's meeting on Monday night, the firm came and actually gave a very similar presentation to what Patrick gave to us at our last meeting. For the most part, I thought the board really liked it. I went and read our recommendations to the board, so they had that front and center and knew where we stood. Sandy reiterated quite a bit of it for us, which was great. And the only other thing that was, well, there are two other things that were primarily discussed at that meeting that somewhat affected us. The off-leash issue that was discussed several months ago was brought back up. I think that's something, because it would be, if we ever do move in the direction as a town of having off-leash areas that aren't dog parks, it would be an open space. I volunteered to the board that would be something that would fit within OSAC's purview, and if they did move forward with something like that, we'd love to have input on it. So who knows where we'll go with that. I think the board is meeting with Boulder County, or the city of Boulder, to understand their green tag program a little bit better. And that's in a couple months, I think is what Matt said. So maybe after that, there'll be more information about it. And then the other thing that was discussed is the approval of allowing golf carts in the roads. There ended up being a lot of discussion about how it would actually happen and how you could get to certain places like Safeway, whether it would actually make more sense to have them on trails or paths, I should say, within the community. And right now wasn't supposed to be including open space, but if it does, I know that's something OSAC would probably want to have a say in, because that, again, falls within our charter and our view. So just one more thing that we should probably keep our eye on.
Was it golf carts or was it electric vehicles?
golf cars.
SLEV, slow something.
I only ask, I
electric
attended an
vehicles.
ATV festival this past weekend, and there are a number of the new hot thing. Now, most of them are gas, but is the side-by-sides, which are more off-roading than, and if that, you have to be careful about what you call an open vehicle and.
This had some descriptor caveat that did not allow ATV.
But
So-
that might be, I'm just saying
Yeah.
that was an ATV.
And they had to be
have-
electric.
But there is a huge market now of these side-by-side vehicles that sit 2 and 4 people, and they're quite impressive. And it would not surprise me, most of the ones I saw were gas, but it would not surprise me if there were electric ones around the corner, especially if towns are
Well,
limiting gas ones, these companies
If you
might go
heard my
that way.
comments that night, I actually think this is, I even used the saying, we're putting the cart before the horse on this one. I think we clearly have not thought through the implications on this. And half the board said, well, we don't have to think through all of this. We'll solve it when the problem arises. On this particular one, where I don't see there's any crying need for immediate action, I don't like that type of thing. My thing is, yeah, if it's an if we've got a flood happening, yeah, we make emergency decisions, right? But golf carts on our city streets, when we are not a golf cart,
Community.
we're not Tucson, Arizona. You know, we've got snow, we've got streets
Which is
that
a great
are
place to be born and
heavily
raised.
trafficked. So that was, I prevailed in the short term. This will probably come up within like a month.
Yeah.
And so if when that appears in the packet, I would appreciate you guys reading it thoroughly from the perspective of what Trish just said, because if there's any possible way to maneuver ATVs because we've been careless with definitions or something.
I
it
would
needs to
say
be brought
not
by.
ATV, it's side-by-side
Or-
seated vehicles, so they could
Yeah, whatever,
clearly
yeah.
fall under what you would call a golf cart.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
the gas ones, they can get up to 50 miles per hour.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and ride smoothly at that over rocks and whatnot, so it was quite,
Right, well,
we had a
that's-
lot of fun this weekend, to say the least, but,
yeah.
but that was in an area that it was allowed. I don't
Right, right,
know
right.
that we would want those screaming across our open space.
I
So-
just have a calendar note on this item for the STC Parks 1 and 2 that the presentation is going to go forward to the Planning Commission on September 6th and then revisit the board on the 12th, September 12th.
September 12th. Well, to reiterate, to say two things. One, I will keep saying this because it's so important. It's great that your leadership attends the board meeting and uses public comment to apprise the board of your opinions and what you're doing and everything else. It really keeps you in the board's consciousness, so keep doing it. And then two, I thought the presentation on Parks 1 and 2 was so full of energy, you know. It was really exciting if you sat through some of those that droned on and were uncreative and but the victory for this group here is the gentleman said Coal Creek Corridor was ignored in the previous iterations, and now here it is, and it must be here. They didn't understand why it would ever be ignored. And so very exciting. I mean, so that's where tenacity pays off. So good work.
The next one was Trail Maintenance Volunteer Project. Allison, was anyone from our committee able to attend that?
I went.
Yeah.
I took my family and it's not even my wife's or my father-in-law's new wife, and so yeah, it was fun. We had a good time.
How many people?
So there were 6 people, and The group fixed and cleaned water bars, and the location was Rock Creek and Torrey's Circle. And a lot of washed out crusher fines were also replaced on the trail. So, I mean, 6 people is great, though. I mean, it's a good group, and they got a lot done.
At the
I mean, there
last
were more like 10 of us there.
Oh, was there?
Yeah, so,
Change that.
well, I guess if you don't count the kids, I guess it depends on if it's adults only or,
So that's the number I had under sign up, but
sure. Well, but like I signed up and I brought 4 people with me,
Right.
so.
So up that number.
Is there work there that kids can do, or does it really need to be a grown-up thing?
No, we were picking weeds, and I would pile up weeds, and they'd take them up to the wheelbarrow, and they grabbed shovels and rakes, and were moving rocks around, and they got bored after an hour, but we kept them busy
Right.
for an hour. And there were snacks
helped out.
provided, and they loved that part, so.
Right.
And then
Now,
they-
this is the one where, wasn't it a really late notice?
Not for
That was the
this one.
bikes.
That was the bike one, and my family went to that.
And
and
you
we
guys
had
went to
kids,
that
and Corey Oshner from the ProStack, a number of ProStack members were there as well, but he brought his kids, and I agree. You know, for some of these, they helped pick up weeds, they helped do stuff, and Tori, she provided snacks, so that goes over very well, you know, for the kids. And I think if one comes up that they don't want kids, they should just be clear on that, but there's definitely stuff that kids can do on it and assist with.
Where do you find the dates, or how do we let the community know about this?
They've been doing it with the CAC and some other email blast kinds of things.
So it goes in the newsletters, the CAC. It's on our website. We have a volunteer page where you can see all the different opportunities and sign up for them, and it has all the tasks. So, for example, Chili Fest, there's going to be a volunteer set up on the website where people can go in, select what they would like to do to volunteer, and then the town staff, Tori Peterson, who is our volunteer coordinator, would reach out and let you know what to do.
There's also, I think, a volunteer email list that you can sign up to be on, because I get it that way as well, as you are on the volunteer email list. Here's our upcoming things.
There's a lot of different, the listserv, the newsletters, the website.
So for the newer members, get yourself on the e-blast list. Go to the superiorcolorado.gov and sign up to receive town communications, and you'll be put on this e-blast list. So,
And that one's different than the listserv? Because the listserv's
Yes.
more community interaction.
I'm on everything. I want to hear everything. So I say sign up for everything.
Okay.
Bulletin board and town newsletter, is that it?
Yes.
The bulletin board is the CAC, right?
Right, and so.
No, the list serves the CAC,
Well,
right?
is that what but is that called the
Is it
bulletin
called
board?
the bulletin
It
board
is.
too? Okay.
Yeah, and then I said, Tori's got a volunteer list as well that.
I think if you sign up as a
But-
volunteer,
But just so you're aware, the newsletter will have the most comprehensive information on everything. And then the listserv, which is the community bulletin board, for example, I do blasts through that for our programs, but our programs are also in the newsletter. So you might get a lot of duplicative information. It's just how you would like to, what you're the most interested in, or
Is
how
it-
much you want.
Is the
things to
newsletter
come.
something else we sign up for? Or does
The
that come?
newsletter?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so that's a separate sign up.
You could
Okay.
also get agendas and.
Okay, so just go.
Packets.
Yes.
Well, they get agendas because they're on advisory
Yeah, but
committee.
you
But we
can
can
sign
get
up
other
the other
agendas
way
and-
too.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
most things I get like 3 copies
Right.
of everything, but that's okay.
Okay.
So,
I'm
yeah,
okay
you
with-
want to, if you want to be selective, you can.
There's another one at the bike park. I want to say it's either the 20th or the 27th as well for another volunteer day at the bike park.
Cool.
If you want to bring your kids.
Yeah, just depends on, they'd love it, so
Yeah.
we'll do it.
And I just realized we didn't even talk about attendance for the Chili Fest when we were talking about Chili Fest. Who knows if they can show up? I'll be able to show up for some of that time.
I've
got
got
a
Beer Fest tickets, so I can be there early.
I think I can too. Soccer schedules aren't out yet, but I can usually work around it.
And we can confirm all this through email as well, but just.
But I will say right now, I will not stand next to the snake.
Just a quick calendar note, the Bike Park Builders is August 27th from 8 to 7, or 8 to 10, 8 a.m. to 10.
Wait, say that again.
Bike Park Builders, the volunteer sign-up is active, and it's August 27th from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. And then there are shifts available for Chili Fest, and then there's some ongoing opportunities. The Green Thumb Club, who adopts flower beds, and then Snow Busters, who shovel and clear snow for people that have problems clearing snow at their homes during the winter, and then Bike Park Builders. So those three are all ongoing that you could sign up for and get notifications.
All right. I think that was all the updates we had on the agenda. Sandy, did you?
Yeah. When do these guys, have you done your budget for next year? When did
We
they
submitted a
date?
budget recommendation.
You did it all? Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
'cause
think
that's-
Rita was here for you on the night that we did that.
Oh, okay, good. Okay,
Yeah, Rita
thanks.
attended.
Okay, so, update on the Rocky Flats process. I, in the past week or 10 days, got a document from the gentleman who is the FLAP grant coordinator for the Department of Transportation. And I told you last meeting that Patrick and Matt Magley and I sat down with him over a preliminary thing he had put together that included trails around Rocky Flats, which of course makes my heart very happy. And they work through what's possible and what's not possible. So we got this big document that includes 3 potential alternatives around Rocky Flats and 2 alternatives through Rocky Flats. One that crosses Indiana more midway and one that crosses Indiana more northern. Anyway, where this involves you guys is, I just had a discussion with the manager today. I'd like you guys to see this document and review those trails around, because one of them comes down McCaslin and joins Colton Trailhead, and then follows Meadowlark, Singletree, and up to the 36 Bikeway. One of them, if you drive it, what they're hoping, you know where Great Western Reservoir is by any chance? It's in Broomfield, sort of north of Stanley Lake. So this alignment goes north on the east side of Great Western. The significant part of my little thing here is that it goes up to 128. You take 128 west to McCaslin, and you go down McCaslin, right? And you get to the Colton Trailhead. Well, you may or may not be aware that a social trail has emerged from 128 onto McCaslin that cuts off that corner, because that corner goes sort of like this. So people have done this. That has an official name called the St. Francis Trail. And
Is that across level 3 property, though?
Okay. It's partly, yes.
Okay.
And,
that's what I would think.
So they are included in this is actually that social trail, St. Francis Trail. And this gentleman's quite excited about this opportunity because it allows the whole Greenway. You know, the 80 miles of the Greenway, 30 miles of it or so has been built already from the Arsenal up by DIA. down this way, and it's going to terminate in Rocky Mountain National Park. What's at issue here is how we deal with Rocky Flats. And your committee, for the new members, said, no way do we want to cut through Rocky Flats. So it's very exciting to me that there are 3 alternatives in here that don't cut through Rocky Flats. And we've been told by this gentleman there may be one that does go through, but there will be maybe an alternative around, which is what Boulder County and Boulder have come to insist upon, that people have a choice. So if that's what happens, I think that's a great thing. Anyway, I want this group to look at these 3 options and make sure you guys don't see a huge problem with any of them, because if you do, then we'd have to get back with them and say, take this one out or modify it in this manner.
Yeah, so that area that Sandy was just talking about is right there, the dotted green lines.
Right.
That's the St. Francis Trail.
Right. And
if you can't see it, sorry, that's 128, that's McCaslin.
So when you guys were presented this, can I use your phone? Needless to say, I'm well passionate about Rocky Flats. So when you guys were presented the presentations by the anti-Rocky Flats people, this is really what was in the works. Putting in a overpass here that cuts through Rocky Flats and then exits here where there would be 1 or 2 underpasses, right? And the connection would be then with Boulder County trails here or here, right? And this Colton Trail is what you guys were talking about. Up here it goes straight across and it's all rutted and all that kind of stuff, okay? So as a result of all this complaining and appearance of public meetings and the vote of the town of Superior was part of this. Here's what's happened. Right now, the trail is completed to somewhere around here. The thought process is, why don't we have a trail that takes advantage of some infrastructure already in place here, go up here to 128, cut across 128 with this St. Francis Trail, and go down McCaslin, and then connect with the Colton Trailhead and up to 36 up there. It's just very exciting because it shows public complaining works to elevate an argument. You know, if you don't go through this, you'll never have a chance. And I and the same scientists you have here and various other people attended virtually every city council meeting at least once, and sometimes 3 or 4 or 5 times, depending on how long their decision-making process went. So anyway, it's in the works, and the exciting thing is, most likely, we voted no as a town. We will in no way help pay for these connections that allow this trail through Rocky Flats. After we voted, Boulder started an initiative that basically put a lot of pressure on municipalities to vote yes on the condition that additional testing happen at Rocky Flats, because the federal government has been unwilling to conduct additional soil sampling on Rocky Flats now for a number of years. And so they felt this was a way to kick the federal government into conducting more soil sampling. The real dangerous downside of that strategy is that if those soil samples, however they're collected, show no more contamination than the standard from the state, the trail will go through, right? So to hedge their bets, Boulder and Boulder County, Boulder's the driver of that testing thing, also submitted letters to the Greenway Commission insisting on an alternative alignment. So I hope we at least get the alternative alignment, and certainly if this one goes through, I hope the heck we definitely get the alternative alignment. So anyway, that's gonna come to you, and this is gonna go to ProStack as well, because this, look where Little Town of Superior is. This trail comes really close to homes back here. And so we'll need ProStack to weigh in on it as well. So anyway.
You mentioned three alternatives. Oh, I'm sorry, Sandy. You mentioned three alternatives. Was just this? Is this just one of them?
One of them. This is one.
Okay.
Way around. The other way around is going this way, all the way up here and then down, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or here and going up to Boulder, right? And the third way is a newbie. Somehow they're presuming on that third way that Jefferson Parkway goes in. Now Jefferson Parkway uses this alignment here at Indiana, but Jefferson Parkway goes over here to towards Sims and then cuts through on the east side of the mall and all that kind of stuff.
Is that the purple line? Is that the line of Jefferson Parkway?
Yeah, that may be exactly what that is.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, good. You know what? I called Matt Magna and I said, what are they talking about here? And neither here or I could figure it out, so thanks, Allison. So that would probably come here then? How does it connect and go over that way?
Yeah, to make it a full loop.
Where is, I'm looking for the key.
There we go.
Proposed Jefferson
Yep,
Parkway.
there you go.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Existing social trail.
Okay.
Does he realize he's going over level 3 property?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It says in the report.
Well, that's what I'm wondering, if it
Yeah,
can be
this
turned
report has a
into.
lot of copy in it, and they're aware that we'd have to reach agreements, et cetera, et cetera. I think actually the Jefferson Parkway route, the interesting thing about the Jefferson Parkway route, though, is it's dependent on when the Jefferson Parkway is ever built. So it's much more speculative.
Yeah.
But the exciting thing to some of this alternative trail thing is if it's approved, then some of your objectives in your trails plan will be maybe financed in part by the federal government.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking if it goes down McCaslin, that runs right into the.
Into what we're proposing.
On, we didn't go up the grade of the hill, but then they would come down the hill and connect in, and maybe some of that would get.
Right. Well, the interesting thing that we need to get home, but the interesting thing, that Colton Trail, you know, I don't know how it veers off here and then goes straight and is all rutted. So Meadowlark is up here and it's got that western connection that you just said, they said was not possible,
Yeah.
right? Because of whatever, you know, Boulder County said was not possible. But the interesting thing is if this is the choice that is taken, is really developing that shoulder into a nice trail and going down here, my mind's eye says, well, all of a sudden, the ability for you to connect here and just cut across to that western peninsula becomes sort of appealing, right?
Yep.
So I thought to myself as I was reading that well, maybe down the road that becomes more doable than it appears to be right now.
Yeah.
Who knows?
This is exciting. It also is a little nervous too, though, because I feel like I don't want to necessarily have people be off, you know, if some version of that orange trail happens and then they have nice access to come tromping down.
Oh, sure. Well, and that's the reality. That's the absolute reality, that all those bike tires that may have potential particles of plutonium on it come onto our trails. I've used that at every meeting I've gone to, is why would you ever do this and allow it to contaminate the 30 miles you built this way and all the existing trails this way?
And so that's a potential thing, and as I was reading it this morning, I thought, man, where it intersects with us, maybe we should have a water feature. You have to drive through. So it washes your tires, you know, before it comes into town.
Large water feature.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. So this will be on our next agenda, so we can talk about it in detail, make recommendations as needed, and go through there. So yeah. Did anybody else have any comments, questions, or anything for the good of the order before we dismiss? All right, we're adjourned.
Ken gets his copies in.
And by the way, there are going to be public hearings on all of this conducted by DOT or FLAP or whoever. So that's a great place for you guys to consider to be.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Allison.
Are those the numbers that match up to the spreadsheet?
Yeah, that's what
Do they match up to?
They should match up. Did you guys?
Yeah, I know. Now I'm trying to remember where I ended up putting that.
Yeah, so let's see. So just grab a number, any number of those. So they should be, so let's say 6. So this is 10 stops, trail on West Side of Castle. So yeah, so that trail number should correspond to what times.
Just got back from work trip and vacation. Now it's gone for 20 days, so came in last night.
Exactly, it would just be tying that description into the map.
That kind of, yeah. It was fun. Where'd you go? Becky's. Becky's. Oh, okay. She got married at West Dennis. So right at the lighthouse inn right there. And then we just saw our relatives. I was up past the Franconia Notch, and that's where they had an ATV festival. Which was, well, it was great. Well, it was weird in the sense that my sister knew about it. She has a house up there, so. But I'm telling you, there are a lot of fun. You know,
That exists, like no history.
well, you can actually get them, they can get, street pictures. Yeah. So, but.
And they do go 50 miles an hour, because they're not going much slower than.
Yeah, so they go to street food, and like I said, I mean, my son would be like, buy one of those, buy one of those, they're so cute.
It's like
So it would definitely be, you know, just something to think of that I think is so, yeah, we're gonna put that on the golf cart.
You're walking the dog on a random level, and then so.
It's hard, I mean, but it's hard. Like, it's just another thing, another, etiquette thing, you know, to just figure out, I'm not saying it shouldn't be allowed, but just to figure out and not necessarily figure out after it's passed, you know?
Yes, I thought, I may have replied, I thought I might not have pushed that.
You did, I might have missed it every time.
I don't know exact answers to those questions. That you will have some questions.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Have a nice evening.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really,
I don't want to steer you wrong.
it's super like low key, it's, you know, and it wouldn't be like.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out to the volunteer trail.
That was fun. Well, it's nice to meet Tori. She's great.
She is great.
She's so bubbly
And gets the kids involved.
Oh, she was great.
That's
Yeah.
good. I'll let her know that.
Yeah. So.
Oh, yeah, it was fun. Look forward to the next one. It's good to get the kids out.
Night, everybody.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, that was great. I'm looking for an opportunity to get my kids on.
But we're always worried about more. Yeah, it's hard.
Yep, we do. Okay, I won't worry about it.
Thank you. Hi. Hey, Ken asked me to ask you, so on the side, I'm a real estate agent, and I was thinking about going around and knocking on. Oh yeah, go ahead. Going around and knocking on doors, no solicitation doors, but just knocking on doors, and I'd like to have something like just that would be helpful for the neighbors. So I was just gonna put like upcoming neighborhood events on a little piece of paper and be handing them out, and I just wanted to make sure that would be okay if some of them were OSAC events. Just stuff I would get from the newsletters.
I don't really see that as being a problem. I can
Okay.
talk to, a couple of resources and see.
Nothing official, not unduly making a relationship between me and the city, but just
Right.
so I have something to say, I'm just passing out this, events calendar. How are you? That kind of thing.
Right, well, we do have, there is, like, I don't know if it would be relevant, but you could go to the website and pull the link for, like, rec guides that has everything in it.
Yeah, I would just get whatever's public information. I didn't want to do it and then have someone.
I can ask.
Come
Let
up
me make
to the
sure.
committee and have a cow or something. But I wouldn't be going up on doors that said no and, it's
Right,
just
no
this-
solicitation.
Right, because I'm trying to like make connections in the neighborhood, not get everyone pissed at me.
Right, well, I could definitely ask and then,
Okay.
see what the response is for you, and if you don't mind, if you wanna send me like a quick email.
Sure.
About like, hey, this is what I wanna do, and I would be happy to like, make sure that everything's fine, and then you don't have to worry about it.
Okay, great, yeah, thanks. Thank you so much for doing this, I really appreciate it. Do you know where the bus stop is?
I do, I have